There's an abundant amount of evidence proving life was around long before mainstream teachings are telling us. In fact, the ancients were far more advanced than perhaps even ourselves. Some of the most undeniable findings are based on the archaeology of an international explorer named Jonathan Gray, a man who's led some of the most important archaeological expeditions of our time for the past 37 years. He's documented 64 accomplishments of the ancients that human civilization has yet to achieve. For example, moving stones from the earth that weighed 20,000 tons and constructing them without cranes or massive construction tools. To this day, we do not have a crane or a tool that could transport and construct these stones as they did. So how did they do it? According to Jonathan Gray, the ancient Egyptians used some form of sound wave technology. And note this, that the ancient Egyptians spoke of an arrhythmic banging and singing that can either change the atomic structure of an object or manipulate the gravitational field, allowing objects to be moved easier. Now, did you know they found lights from the ancients that were still illuminated? Not just in Egypt either, but in Rome, India, and South America. Lights have been found dating thousands of years old, still shining to this day. In Rome, Cicero's daughter's tomb was discovered in the 1600s, and the lights were still on inside the tomb. Thousands of people witnessed this tomb, and it was dated to be over 2,000 years old. Jonathan Gray has gone on record to speak about the 11 minutes of the missing moon landing broadcast also. Gray said he specifically remembers being in Australia and listening to the broadcast in 1969. Michael Collins, the astronaut that orbited around the moon, actually said live on the air there was a building on the moon. He said it was a 7-story building and explained other sightings as well. This 11 minutes was never broadcast to the US, and it was cut out of every major broadcast, but still hundreds, if not thousands of people heard it in other countries. The moon is a huge conspiracy, all of its own. Ancient Hindu scriptures speak of going to the moon around 2000 BC, and even spoke accurately of its physical conditions long before we had any record of it. So you may be asking yourself, why are we not told about these past civilizations and many other findings? Well, it's simple. If these artifacts and truths were to be exposed to the public view, then lives, careers, reputations, religions, and much more would fall under great scrutiny. Many would start to question our authorities, and they don't feel you're ready for the truth and the change that the truth will bring. Truth is, everything you've been taught for your entire life, it's only just a theory. Here's some interesting facts. Research shows most minerals we need to live, like carbon, are floating around in space. This leads scientists to believe life would be elsewhere also. Only in the last 20 years, mass cities off the coasts of Cuba, India, Australia, and Japan are being found sunk under the ocean. There is evidence of entire continents sinking into the ocean. In Antarctica, under the ice, huge forests of trees over 80 feet tall have been found. Now this proves at one point it was habitable and warm with life. NASA has had a satellite taking measurements of Saturn for the past 20 years. and the atmospheric pressure has changed by 30% in just that time alone. That change is enough to end planet Earth as we know it. Gray examined a mummy skull of an ancient Egyptian that was over 2,800 years old, and he saw what looked like a bullet fracture in the skull. For further examination, the skull was sent out to forensics, and it was proven beyond any reasonable doubt that it was certainly a hole created with the velocity and capability of an actual bullet, if not a bullet itself. Now that seems to make no scientific or logical sense at all, right? Well, we're only getting started. There's currently a tribe in the Amazon of more than 30,000 people who live in ancient underground cities that are extremely elaborate with air ventilation, water, and lighting systems dating to thousands of years ago. Turkey also has ancient tunnel systems in extreme detail with rooms, kitchens, and even a movie theater. In Spain, an ancient city was found and the government flooded it. Now, why do you imagine they would do that? There are many ancient underground cities and tunnel systems that we're unaware of. There is an underground tunnel that spans from Belize to Guatemala with many intricate rooms and hallways. The Chinese drafted a map in 1418 showing that the world was round. And in 1421, the Chinese sent out more than 100 ships that carried nearly 30,000 people, almost like floating cities to search and navigate the entire world. And it's said that they even found America on this journey. Very few ships made it back to China because of a huge meteor hitting the sea in which they sailed. It created a huge tsunami. Estimated 700-foot high waves hit the coast of New Zealand. Over 50 ships have been found embedded into the land and rock in that area, and the crater found from the impact was about 12 miles across. Recently in New Zealand, there was an expedition that led to some artifacts said to be able to change our history overnight. However, the government deemed the contents of the exposition not to be revealed until the year 2063. Now, why is it that they don't want to reveal the findings now? Here's something you might not have known. In New Zealand school systems, they're taught that they are the first settlers there. New Zealand is a new country in comparison. In Egypt, there were bones found of a human nearly 12 feet tall. And this would almost confirm giants, as in biblical terms, in relation to the story of David and Goliath. In New South Wales, Australia, an electric device was found about 3,000 feet underground that looked like a spark plug. In King Tut's tomb, there were schematics found of an actual airplane. There are many ancient tablets showing flying crafts also. So maybe we didn't invent these things after all. Here's a thought. What if the ancients were right in their scriptures of the end? So much proof shows many civilizations lived before us, were developed like us, and some tragic event wiped them completely off the planet. Also in Egypt, a picture thousands of years old show what looks like a helicopter. Over 3,000 years ago in Egypt, they had special temples for worship, and they would conduct ceremonies that were made to scare the worshippers. And this was all under the influence of their god, Horus. After the scare tactic, they would hear his soothing voice and then watch the face of their god getting closer to them in a dark room. This was simply done with a projector and light. They even had slide pictures that were projected to their people. So this is the reason why they were so obedient to their god, because they truly believed in him. But keep this in mind, it was faked, even back then. holes in the Great Pyramid proved to be drilled with a type of tool 500 times more powerful than that of any modern drills. Every one of these artifacts have been studied and confirmed. These aren't at all make-believe findings. Egypt also has a huge underground area, miles long and several levels into the earth. In the year 800, when the Arabs were searching these areas, they found lights still illuminated. These are some really advanced findings. There's actually an ancient city in the Amazon that has the same form of ancient lighting technology as found in Egypt. Jonathan Gray says in Egypt and South America, there is evidence of heart transplants, which are shown in ancient images also. Gray has even gone on record to say there is in fact evidence that Atlantis does exist. Here's something you'll find interesting. In India, there's a 3 square mile area that has high levels of dangerous radiation, which causes birth defects in their surrounding areas. In Iraq, in the North African desert, there's evidence of glass created by nuclear blasts. Is this evidence of an ancient nuclear explosion? Perhaps, but this certainly proves a nuclear presence long before we invented nuclear energy. Believe it or not, in mainstream teachings, they tell us that the tomato is only a few centuries old and supposedly from South America. But there's proof otherwise. In China, a tomb was discovered over 2,000 years old, and along with the mummy was some ancient seeds. 40 of these seeds sprouted into tomato plants. Did you know Oklahoma recently had an archaeological find that was deemed restricted by our government? It was an unusual structure composed of all stone, and after being analyzed, it was found to be a huge smelter for refining gold, and gold thousands of years old was also found. There were symbols carved into the stones, but they were unable to confirm any origin. This site was shut down and buried by our government, and some government officials threatened the owners of the land to never dig it up again. As to which government agency is unofficial. Most of all ancient artifacts are similar to what us as humans today achieved or are trying to achieve. Ancient artifacts are found all the time that change worldly knowledge as it's taught today. But mainstream science will not touch it, because archaeologists are threatened with prison and even murder. There was an archaeologist named Lisa Kerr who found a huge human skeleton in Mexico. She said FBI agents and Smithsonian Institute officials took over her site and restricted the area. She said the agents started searching her before and after she left her own site. And she was also made to sign a confidentiality agreement not to disclose any other findings. However, information did leak, and it was reported that it was an 8-foot skeleton with 6 toes on each foot and a strange double row alignment of teeth. The crates of the findings were taken to the Smithsonian Institute, probably never to be seen or heard of again. Gray also spoke of a finding in the Amazon of a juice-like substance that when spilled onto a solid, like a rock, it would make it soft. According to Gray, at least 5 ancient civilizations were destroyed by nuclear wars. And in India, an underground corridor was discovered, and everything in the room was crystallized. The walls, the furniture, even the people. And the only thing that can explain this type of fusion is nuclear heat. Here's something they won't tell you in mainstream teachings. There are radioactive skeletons from the year 3000 BC. The ancient ruins of the Mohenjo-Daro and the Harappa are extremely radioactive. Not much is known of their histories except that they were destroyed suddenly. In Mohenjo-Daro, there is a crater 150 feet wide where everything there was found crystallized, fused, and melted. Every skeleton was flattened to the ground. It's claimed that these skeletons are as radioactive of those found at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. No natural burning flame or even a volcanic eruption can produce heat intense enough to cause the phenomenon of these skeletons and these areas being crystallized and melted in this form. Only atomic energy and nuclear blasts can explain this. These skeletons prove there was a form of nuclear or atomic energy over 5,000 years ago. Highly radioactive skeletons were also found in Indus. The Brahmastra and Vimana are nothing more than earlier versions of today's nuclear weapons and spacecraft. Just a few years ago, there were some Sanskrit documents found in Lhasa, Tibet, which were sent to the University of Chandigarh to be translated by Dr. Ruth Rana. She said the documents contain directions for building a spaceship. The Ramayana have a highly detailed story of going to the moon in a Vimana. According to ancient Vedic texts, ancient Hindus had flying machines which were called Vimanas. The text described a Vimana to be a double-decked, singular aircraft with portholes and a dome, much like how we would expect a flying saucer to look. In 1875, the Vaimanika Shastra, which is the science of aeronautics, was found in an ancient temple in India. It's a Sanskrit text on aeronautics, discussing specifically the construction of Vimanas. There are 230 stanzas dealing with the construction, takeoff, cruising, normal and forced landings, protection from storms, lightning, and how to switch the drive to use solar energy. According to Stephen Knapp, the Vaimanika Shastra describes in detail the construction for what's called the Mercury Vortex engine, which is basically a forerunner of ion engines being made by NASA today. According to archaeologist Michael Cremo, the ancient Sanskrit writings show how they could look into a woman's embryo and see the fetus. Ancient Sanskrit writings also say the Earth has ended 6 times before and had to be repopulated. Cremo says the oldest disputed fossil that paleontologists have showing evidence for human life goes back to the beginning of Earth itself, not several 100,000 years ago as we're taught. It is purposely suppressed and kept a secret. It's called the knowledge filtering process, says Cremo. In 1880, California state geologist J.D. Whitney discovered proof of human life 300 feet under Table Mountain dating 55 million years ago. He wrote a book about his findings, which was published by Harvard. There's evidence for so many findings, yet it's kept from mainstream education. Another archaeologist named Virginia McIntyre was silenced by the government. Her career was ruined because of her findings in Mexico, which proved human life was around in North America 300,000 years ago, not 33,000 as we're told by mainstream archaeology. There is absolute proof of human footprints in fossil rock dating to 3.5 million years ago. These were found by Mary Leakey, one of the most credible and famous archaeologists of our time. But these findings are yet again suppressed from the public. In 6000 BC, there was a culture of people called the Sumerians who lived in Mesopotamia, which is now known as Iraq. We are taught in our school systems today that they are the first culture to make up the alphabet and to invent writing. They also invented our calendar, our time in terms of how we use it, the 12 months in a year, the 12 inches in a foot, the 12 hours in the day, and the 12 hours in the night. Our understanding in math and fractions, including the metric system, all come from the Sumerians. The 360 degrees in a circle, the 60 minutes in an hour, and the 60 seconds in a minute. We still to this day use much of what they originally created. The Sumerians also separated the heavens into 12 portions, which we know as the 12 signs of the zodiac. The Sumerians also wrote of and depicted the DNA strand as we know it, also being the symbol today for modern medicine and biology, the two snakes intertwined. They are truly an amazing culture to have such an understanding of these elements. The Sumerians left behind some 5,000 ancient tablets and artifacts, which have been studied for many years and are on display or kept in many famous museums all around the world. Out of some of these tablets, it explains the creation of man as we know it, along with our solar system and its chemical makeup. They had a great understanding for our universe, explaining our planets exactly and their structures long before NASA confirmed any of it. They expressed how Mars was red and Pluto was green, and they told of how they both contained water. We have a tablet from the Sumerians which depicts our solar system exactly how we know it. However, there was one more additional planet shown on their tablet. They said this planet was called Nibiru. There are 54 other cultures that speak of this planet, but the Sumerians are the oldest of the races. They spoke of aliens that created them and gave them the understanding of the planets and the solar system. These aliens that lived on planet Nibiru are called the Anunnaki. We've confirmed everything they said revolving around our planet and our solar system. They've been right about it all. So could they be right about this planet Nibiru? And perhaps we just haven't found it yet? You know, we only found Pluto in the 1930s. That means the Sumerians knew of Pluto and even named it 6,000 years before we even found it. So again, could they be right about planet Nibiru? NASA recently confirmed a planet outside of our solar system, which they call Planet X, Eris, or Xena. NASA has been tracking it since the 80s, in fact. The Sumerians said Nibiru, unlike the other planets, the rotation had the opposite orbit and had a direct path around the Earth every 3,600 years. They symbolized this planet in their tablets as a cross. It's called the Planet of the Crossing. Also interesting is how much of the Sumerian writings and stories can be found in the Bible. Professor Thomas Paine says the Bible is a collection of myths from Sumerian text. The story of the Great Flood is actually written on a Sumerian tablet in the British Museum, interpreted by an archaeologist by the name of George Smith in the early 1900s. It speaks of how the Anunnaki told them to gather their people, their animals, and to build a ship, just like in the Bible. However, it was written that the passing of Nibiru created the Great Flood. The Sumerians say the Anunnaki came here and fused 80% of themselves with 20% of the already evolving man on Earth, somewhat like the Bible expresses when God made man. No scientist to this day can scientifically confirm how the human evolved from the Neanderthal man. They said evolution for a while, but nothing has ever scientifically explained the Y chromosome difference between us. Scientists say something had to genetically fuse these chromosomes. The Sumerians show the Anunnaki making humans in jars, almost like test tube babies. The land in which man was created in Sumerian text was called the Eden, and the Anunnaki called the man here Adams, oddly enough. In the Bible, it refers to fallen angels called the Nephilim, and the Sumerians also speak of the Nephilim being the sons of gods. Genesis 6:4. The Nephilim were on the earth in these days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. As I mentioned, some of the Sumerian tablets can be found in the British Museum. One of these tablets actually shows the lunar eclipse every 50 years on the exact day. In Iran, there are enormous tablets the size of walls. They show the Anunnaki to be larger beings than the humans, and coming down from the skies in disc-shaped craft or crafts with wings. In Paris, a huge Sumerian tablet shows one of the Anunnaki gods holding the fruit of life and bearing the water of life. The Sumerians spoke of planet Earth as the seventh planet, not the third planet as we know it today, being the third planet from the sun. They knew of Earth as the seventh planet inward from Nibiru. They said Nibiru hit our primitive planet, which at the time was called Tiamat, some 4.7 billion years ago. And they said this collision created the Earth, the Moon, and our asteroid belt. Many scientists have studied this theory, and they all agree it's absolutely possible. This theory is called the Orpheus theory, and it's confirmed to be the most possible scientific theory of the Earth's creation. The Sumerians even spoke of the land on Earth being one solid landmass called Pangaea, as it exactly once was before the continents shifted apart. They understood the difference between planets and the sun thousands of years before Galileo interpreted the difference with a telescope. They even understood the North and South poles, and to this day, it would be impossible for us to determine such a thing without ground-penetrating radar technology. We as humans today only use upwards to 15% of our brain. The Sumerians say the Anunnaki built us with their bodies and brains, but only engineered us to use a percentage of our brain. Otherwise, we would be the same as them. And we were only created to be a slave race of workers, not to be equals. This is a culture of people directly out of the Stone Age, and to this day, we still use their method of time, math, and astronomy systems. Science has always looked for the missing link to bridge us between the caveman and the Homo sapien man as we are today. But still, we don't know the truth, and we may never know the truth. But I can assure you this, someone knows. Have some healthy skepticism, and don't trust everything mainstream science and the media tells you. Look at the well-known facts and decide for yourself.